Welcome to this episode of a true crime documentary series exploring one of the most extraordinary cases of survival and rescue in modern American history. Today, we turn our attention to the story of Shawn Hornbeck, a case that began as a heartbreaking disappearance in rural Missouri and, against all odds, ended in what many would come to call the Missouri Miracle. This is not a story of sensational horror. Instead, it's a careful examination of a family's unwavering hope, the tireless work of law enforcement and volunteers, and the remarkable resilience of a young boy who endured years of unimaginable hardship. We approach this narrative with deep respect for the survivors, their families, and the investigators who never stopped searching. Our goal is to highlight the importance of community vigilance, the power of persistence in missing persons cases, and the hope that even the longest nights can end in daylight. Our story opens on a quiet Sunday afternoon in early October, 2002, in the small, tight-knit community of Richwoods, Missouri. Richwoods is a rural area in Washington County, about 55 miles southwest of St. Louis, a place where rolling hills, dense woods, and winding country roads define the landscape. It's the kind of town where neighbors know each other, kids ride bikes freely, and life moves at a gentle pace. For most families here, Sunday afternoons are for relaxation, church, or simple errands. Shawn Damian Hornbeck was born on July 17, 1991. By the fall of 2002, he was an active, bright-eyed 11-year-old fifth grader with a love for the outdoors. He enjoyed riding his lime green mountain bike, hanging out with friends, and the everyday adventures that come with being a kid in the countryside. Shawn lived with his mother, Pam Akers, and his stepfather, Craig Akers. The family was close-knit. Craig had been a steady presence in Shawn's life, and plans were already in place for him to formally adopt the boy. On October 6, 2002, a crisp, sunny day, Shawn asked permission to ride his bike to a friend's house, something he had done many times before. The route was familiar, a short stretch along the rural roads near their home. His parents trusted him, he knew the area well, and the distance wasn't far. They watched as he pedaled off, full of energy, the afternoon light catching on his bike. That was the last time they saw him that day. When Shawn didn't return home within the expected time, concern quickly set in. At first, Pam and Craig assumed he might have stayed longer at his friend's or stopped to play along the way, typical for an 11-year-old. But as the minutes stretched into 45 minutes, then an hour, a mother's intuition took over. Pam later described that gut feeling. Something was terribly wrong. The Akers immediately jumped into their car and began driving the route Shawn would have taken, calling his name, searching the roadsides and driveways. Nothing. No sign of the lime green bike, no sign of Shawn. By late afternoon, they contacted local authorities. The Washington County Sheriff's Department responded swiftly. Deputies arrived at the home, took statements, and began coordinating an initial search. Word spread quickly through the community. Neighbors, friends, and family members gathered, flashlights in hand as dusk fell. Volunteers combed the nearby woods and fields, calling out for the boy. The search area expanded with every passing hour. By evening, the disappearance was officially classified as a missing child case. Law enforcement contacted the Missouri State Highway Patrol and the FBI, recognizing the potential seriousness. An Amber Alert system, though still relatively new in 2002, was activated where possible, broadcasting Shawn's description: an 11-year-old white male, approximately 4 feet 9 inches tall, weighing around 80 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. He was last seen wearing casual clothing and riding a distinctive lime green mountain bike. Posters were printed overnight. Shawn's smiling face, from school photos and family snapshots, began appearing on lampposts, store windows, and bulletin boards across Washington County and into neighboring areas. The community rallied. Churches opened their doors for prayer vigils. Local businesses donated food and supplies for search teams. Fire departments and emergency personnel joined the effort, using ATVs and dogs to cover the rugged terrain. In the first 24 hours, hundreds of leads poured in. Sightings of boys on bikes, strange vehicles in the area, anything that might connect. Investigators followed each one diligently, but none led to Shawn. one early detail emerged that would linger in the case files. Witnesses in the vicinity reported seeing a white pickup truck in the area around the time Shawn disappeared. The description was vague, a common vehicle in rural Missouri, but it was noted. No license plate, no clear make or model, just a white truck that seemed out of place or moved suspiciously. At the time, it was one thread among many. As days turned into a week, the search intensified. Ground teams scoured hundreds of acres, helicopters flew overhead, divers checked nearby ponds and creeks. The FBI brought in behavioral analysts to assist with profiling potential scenarios. Was this a runaway case? Unlikely, given Shawn's happy home life. An accident or something far more sinister? Pam and Craig Akers spoke publicly for the first time, their voices steady but heavy with emotion. In interviews with local news crews, they pleaded directly to anyone who might have information. If you know anything, please come forward. Shawn is loved. He's missed. We just want him home safe. The media coverage grew. Shawn's story appeared on regional stations, then national outlets. His face became familiar to millions, the boy on the milk carton, the child whose smile seemed frozen in time. Yet despite the massive effort, no solid leads surfaced. The bike was never found. No witnesses came forward with definitive information. The white truck remained a faint possibility, but without more details, it faded into the background. Weeks passed. The intense ground searches gradually scaled back as resources shifted to follow-up investigations. Tips continued to arrive, some credible, most not. Psychics offered visions. Well-meaning callers reported false sightings. Each dead end was a blow, but the Akers refused to waver. In the quiet moments, Pam would drive the same roads Shawn had ridden, eyes scanning every ditch and tree line. Craig, who had worked in technology, began organizing volunteers more formally. The family set up a dedicated tip line and website, determined to keep Shawn's name in the public eye. By the end of 2002, investigators had logged thousands of hours and followed hundreds of leads. The case had become one of Missouri's most prominent missing child investigations, a symbol of both community solidarity and heartbreaking uncertainty. As winter set in, the woods around Richwoods grew cold and silent. Shawn's absence hung over the town like a shadow. But the search, both official and personal, did not stop. Little did anyone know, the answers were closer than they could have imagined, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. The first weeks after Shawn Hornbeck vanished were marked by frantic round-the-clock activity. But as autumn gave way to winter in late 2002, the immediate large-scale ground searches began to wind down. The reality of a long-term missing child case settled in like the cold Missouri air. Hope remained, but the daily rhythm of the investigation changed. Investigators from the Washington County Sheriff's Department, Missouri State Highway Patrol, and the FBI continued working the case full-time. They built a comprehensive timeline of October 6, 2002, re-interviewed every person who lived along Shawn's bike route, and cataloged every tip that came in through the newly established hotline. They mapped out the area in grids, revisited sites where the white pickup truck had been reported, and even used early forms of geographic profiling to narrow potential search zones. Yet, the leads dried up. Many tips turned out to be cases of mistaken identity. Boys on bikes who resembled Shawn from a distance. Others were well-intentioned but unprovable. A handful of callers claimed to have seen suspicious activity near remote cabins or abandoned properties. Each time, teams responded quickly, only to find nothing. The absence of physical evidence, no bike, no clothing, no signs of struggle, made the case extraordinarily difficult. In rural areas like Richwoods, where traffic is light and homes are spread far apart, the window for witnesses is narrow. The family, meanwhile, refused to let the case fade from public memory. Pam and Craig Akers had always been private people, but Shawn's disappearance forced them into the spotlight. They appeared at press conferences, granted interviews to local and national media, and learned quickly how to speak clearly and calmly under pressure. Their message was consistent. Shawn was a happy, loved child who would never run away. Someone knew something. Please help bring him home. In early 2003, the Akers took a decisive step. With the help of friends, supporters, and donations from the community, they officially launched the Shawn Hornbeck Foundation. The nonprofit's mission was twofold: to keep Shawn's case active in the public eye and to create resources that could help other families facing similar nightmares. The foundation began small but grew steadily. They organized annual walks and candlelight vigils in Richwoods and nearby towns. They produced and distributed thousands of flyers, bumper stickers, and T-shirts bearing Shawn's photograph and the words, "Missing since October 6, 2002. Volunteers staffed information booths at county fairs, festivals, and even truck stops along major highways, hoping to reach long-haul drivers who might have passed through the area on that Sunday afternoon. One of the foundation's most impactful initiatives was the creation of a formal volunteer search team. Craig, drawing on his organizational skills, trained dozens of community members in basic search techniques, safety protocols, and evidence preservation. The team conducted regular grid searches in areas that had not been thoroughly covered before: old logging roads, creek beds, and forested ravines. They used metal detectors, GPS units, and cadaver dogs when appropriate. Though heartbreaking, these efforts were methodical and professional, and they kept the pressure on law enforcement to remain engaged. Financially, the search was draining. Pam and Craig had to balance full-time jobs with constant travel for media appearances, meetings with investigators, and foundation work. Medical bills, travel expenses, and the cost of maintaining the search infrastructure added up. Yet the community responded with remarkable generosity. Local restaurants held benefit dinners, churches took up collections, strangers mailed small donations with notes of encouragement. The outpouring reminded the Akers that Shawn was not just their son, he had become a symbol of every parent's worst fear. As months turned into years, the Akers also became advocates on a national level. They spoke at conferences on missing children, met with representatives from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, and worked to improve Amber Alert protocols in Missouri. They learned about the statistics that underscored their own experience. In the United States, hundreds of thousands of children are reported missing each year, but the vast majority are runaways or family abductions. Stranger abductions, the rarest and most dangerous category, account for fewer than 1% of cases, yet they receive the most media attention and public fear. The Akers used this knowledge to educate others. They emphasized the importance of acting quickly in the first hours of a disappearance, the value of community tip lines, and the need for better coordination between local, state, and federal agencies. Their foundation began offering free child safety programs in schools, teaching kids about stranger danger, safe routes home, and what to do if they felt uncomfortable. Despite the advocacy work, the personal toll was immense. Pam has spoken publicly about the sleepless nights, the constant replaying of that final moment when Shawn rode away, and the struggle to maintain hope without slipping into despair. Craig described the feeling of helplessness when every lead failed, yet the determination to keep moving forward because giving up would mean accepting that Shawn was gone forever. The case also attracted its share of challenges. In 2005, the Akers appeared on The Montel Williams Show, a popular daytime program that frequently featured missing persons cases and psychics. A well-known psychic offered a detailed reading, claiming Shawn was alive but in a specific type of location. The segment received massive attention, generating a surge of new tips, but none of them proved accurate. The experience was bittersweet. It kept Shawn in the news, but it also illustrated how easily hope could be manipulated or misled. By 2006, the investigation had settled into a quieter, more investigative rhythm. The FBI maintained an active file. The Washington County Sheriff's Office kept Shawn's case at the top of their cold case priorities. The foundation continued its work, now with a small but dedicated staff and a growing network of supporters across the state. The public still remembered. Every anniversary brought renewed media coverage. Shawn's photo continued to appear on websites, billboards, and in NCMEC posters. Strangers in Missouri and beyond would sometimes approach the Akers in stores or at events, offering hugs and saying they prayed for Shawn every day. Yet 4 years had passed. The boy who disappeared at 11 would now be 15. The lime green bike, if it still existed, would be weathered and forgotten somewhere. The white truck, that single vague clue, had become a footnote in the thick case file. To the outside world, the trail appeared cold, but in the quiet determination of a family that refused to stop, in the persistence of investigators who kept the file open, and in the hundreds of volunteers who still checked their email for any new tip, the search never truly ended. What no one could have predicted was that the break would come not from a new clue about Shawn, but from a completely separate crime, one that would unfold just a few counties away and force the past to collide violently with the present. 4 years and 3 months had passed since Shawn Hornbeck rode his lime green bike down a rural Missouri road and vanished. The case had become one of the longest-running active missing child investigations in the state. The Shawn Hornbeck Foundation continued its quiet, persistent work. Investigators kept the file current, and somewhere, a 15-year-old boy lived in a world few could imagine. Then, on a frigid Monday morning in January 2007, everything changed. January 8, 2007, began as an ordinary school day in the small community of Beaufort, Missouri, about 70 miles east of Richwoods in Franklin County. 13-year-old Ben Ownby lived with his parents, Doris and Hoyt, and his older sister in a modest home on a quiet country road. Ben was a typical middle schooler, good grades, played on the school basketball team, loved video games and spending time with friends. That morning, like every weekday, he walked the short distance from his house to the end of the gravel lane where the school bus would pick him up. A neighbor's teenage son, Mitchell Holtz, was also waiting for the bus that morning. Mitchell was 17, home from school on a break, and standing near the bus stop when he noticed something unusual. A white Nissan pickup truck, older model with a camper shell, slowly approached the stop. The driver, a large man, stopped the vehicle and spoke briefly to Ben. Mitchell watched as Ben climbed into the passenger seat. The truck pulled away. At first, nothing seemed alarming. Kids sometimes got rides from family or neighbors. But then Mitchell heard it, a muffled cry coming from inside the truck as it drove off. The sound was brief, but unmistakable. Something was wrong. Mitchell immediately ran to the Ownby home and told Ben's mother, Doris, what he had seen. Doris called the school to confirm Ben had not arrived on the bus. When the answer came back negative, she called 911. The response was swift and massive. Within minutes, Franklin County deputies were on scene. Because Ben was under 14 and the circumstances suggested abduction, an Amber Alert was issued almost immediately. The description went out statewide and into neighboring states. 13-year-old white male, approximately 5 feet tall, 110 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing a blue hoodie and jeans, entering a white Nissan pickup with a camper shell. The witness, Mitchell Holtz, proved to be the key. Unlike the vague reports from 2002, Mitchell provided specific, actionable details: the make and approximate year of the truck, the presence of the camper shell, the direction the vehicle traveled, and even a partial description of the driver. A white male, heavyset, possibly in his 30s or 40s. Most critically, Mitchell had noticed something else: a partial license plate. He remembered the letters AT and believed there were numbers before or after. Investigators moved with extraordinary speed. The Amber Alert triggered widespread media coverage within hours. Television stations interrupted programming. Highway signs flashed Ben's photo and the truck description. Law enforcement agencies across Missouri and into Illinois began stopping every white pickup matching the profile. Meanwhile, a multi-agency task force formed almost overnight. Franklin County Sheriff's Department led, with immediate support from the Missouri State Highway Patrol, the FBI, and the St. Louis County Police Department, due to the truck's possible connection to the greater St. Louis area. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Teams were consulted. Search warrants were prepared in advance for any potential suspect locations. The partial plate AT became the focal point. Investigators ran every possible combination through DMV databases, thousands of records. They cross-referenced with vehicles registered to individuals with prior criminal histories involving children or vehicles. They looked for connections to the St. Louis metro area, since the truck had headed in that general direction. By the evening of January 8th, the task force had narrowed the field considerably. One name kept surfacing: Michael J. Devlin. Devlin was a 41-year-old man living in an apartment complex in Kirkwood, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis about 40 miles from Beaufort. He drove a white 2002 Nissan pickup with a camper shell. The license plate began with the letters AT. He matched the general physical description provided by Mitchell Holtz. Investigators learned that Devlin worked as a night manager at a local Emo's Pizza restaurant in the Kirkwood area. Co-workers described him as quiet, sometimes awkward, but generally reliable. He lived alone in a second-floor apartment at 1429 Jeffco Boulevard. The task force decided to move carefully. They did not yet have enough for an immediate arrest warrant on the abduction charge, but they did have an unrelated outstanding warrant for Devlin, a minor probation violation stemming from a 2006 traffic offense. It was thin, but it gave them legal grounds to make contact. On the afternoon of January 12, 2007, 4 days after Ben's disappearance, a team of officers approached Devlin's apartment. They knocked, identified themselves, and informed him of the probation warrant. Devlin appeared nervous, sweating despite the cold January air. He agreed to step outside to speak with them. While one group of officers engaged Devlin in conversation on the walkway, others quietly observed the white Nissan pickup parked in the lot below. It matched perfectly. The camper shell, the color, the plate beginning with AT. Tire impressions from the abduction scene had already been photographed and measured. Preliminary comparison looked promising. Devlin was asked routine questions. Where had he been on Monday morning? Did he know anything about a missing boy named Ben Ownby? Devlin denied everything, but his demeanor grew increasingly agitated. He mentioned that he had a godson staying with him, a teenager named Shawn, who was inside the apartment. The name Shawn registered immediately with the investigators who had spent years on the Hornbeck case, but they stayed focused on the present priority, Ben. Devlin refused consent to search the apartment. Officers arrested him on the probation violation and transported him to the station for questioning. A search warrant was rushed through, approved within hours based on the witness identification, the vehicle match, the tire evidence, and Devlin's nervous behavior. As the warrant team prepared to enter the apartment, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. Everyone knew the next few minutes could bring answers, or another heartbreaking dead end. What awaited them inside would rewrite 4 years of unanswered questions and change the lives of 2 families forever. The search warrant had been granted. Michael Devlin remained in custody at the station, still under questioning about the events of January 8th. He had continued to deny any involvement in Ben Ownby's disappearance, but the mounting circumstantial evidence, the vehicle match, the witness identification, the tire impressions, his visible distress, had sealed the legal path forward. At approximately 4:30 p.m., the entry team, composed of Franklin County deputies, St. Louis County Police, and FBI agents, moved in. They announced themselves clearly, knocked once more for the record, then used a key obtained from the complex manager to unlock the door. Inside, the apartment was dimly lit, cluttered, and quiet. Officers swept the rooms methodically, weapons drawn, calling out to identify any occupants. In the living room, they found him. A teenage boy, thin, pale, with long brown hair, sat on the couch. He looked up at the officers with wide eyes, startled but not panicked. When asked his name, he answered softly, "Shawn." The moment registered instantly. Officers who had worked the Hornbeck case for years felt the air leave the room. They asked again, gently. The boy repeated his name. Then, in a voice that carried 4 years of silence, he added, "Shawn Hornbeck." Simultaneously, in another room, agents located 13-year-old Ben Ownby. He was alive, frightened, but physically unharmed in the immediate sense. Both boys were quickly brought out of the apartment, wrapped in blankets and escorted to waiting paramedics. The news spread like wildfire through the task force radio channels. Within minutes, the command post received confirmation. Shawn Hornbeck, missing since October 6, 2002, had been found alive. The first priority was medical attention and safety. Both boys were transported to a nearby hospital under heavy security. Medical staff conducted thorough examinations, while child advocates and specially trained interviewers remained close by. The families were notified immediately. For Pam and Craig Akers, the call came from investigators they had known for years. The message was simple and surreal. "We have Shawn. He's safe. He's alive." Pam later described the moment as one of overwhelming disbelief, followed by a rush of emotion that could not be contained. Within hours, they were on the road to the hospital, joined by Ben's parents, who were experiencing their own version of that same impossible relief. The media descended quickly. By evening, national networks were broadcasting live from outside the hospital and the apartment complex. Reporters called it the Missouri Miracle almost immediately, a phrase that would stick. Two boys, taken years apart under similar circumstances, recovered in the same place on the same day. With Shawn Hornbeck and Ben Ownby safely out of the apartment and reunited with their families, the focus of law enforcement shifted rapidly from rescue to prosecution. The discovery in that Kirkwood apartment on January 12, 2007, had not only solved one of Missouri's most haunting missing child cases, it had opened the door to what would become one of the most comprehensive criminal investigations in the state's history. The apartment itself became the epicenter of evidence collection. For days, forensic teams worked methodically, photographing every inch, collecting fibers, fingerprints, and biological samples. They seized computers, hard drives, external storage devices, cell phones, and documents. They cataloged clothing, bedding, personal items belonging to both boys, and anything that might connect Michael Devlin to the abductions. Investigators quickly confirmed the timeline. Shawn had been taken on October 6, 2002, the same day he disappeared while riding his bike in Richwoods. Early in the captivity, Devlin had moved him between several locations before settling in the Kirkwood apartment around 2003. Shawn had been enrolled under a false identity in local schools for short periods, then withdrawn when questions arose. He had been instructed to refer to Devlin as his father or guardian. The coercion was maintained through repeated threats. If Shawn tried to leave or tell anyone the truth, Devlin claimed he would harm Shawn's family. Ben's 4-day ordeal followed a similar pattern of control and intimidation. The fact that Devlin had attempted, and nearly succeeded in, a second abduction after more than 4 years suggested a pattern of escalating behavior, one that experts later described as characteristic of long-term captors who begin to feel untouchable. While the physical evidence was being processed, detectives turned their attention to Michael Devlin himself. Devlin, born in 1965, had lived a relatively unremarkable life on the surface. He had worked as a night manager at an Emo's Pizza in the St. Louis area for several years, a job that gave him regular hours and a degree of normalcy. Co-workers described him as large, somewhat reclusive, and occasionally brusque, but no one had reported anything overtly suspicious. He had a few minor prior brushes with the law, mostly traffic violations, but nothing that had raised red flags for violent or predatory behavior. That changed quickly once investigators began digging deeper. Records showed Devlin had lived in several apartments in the Kirkwood area over the years. One address in particular stood out, an earlier residence where neighbors recalled seeing a boy matching Shawn's description in the early 2000s. The boy had been introduced as Devlin's nephew or godson. Some neighbors had thought it odd that the child rarely went outside to play, but no one had reported concerns at the time. The breakthrough came from the digital evidence. Forensic analysis of Devlin's computers revealed extensive material related to child exploitation, images and videos that violated federal law. This discovery expanded the case from state-level kidnapping charges to federal jurisdiction. The FBI took a leading role, charging Devlin with multiple counts related to child exploitation materials. As the investigation widened, detectives interviewed co-workers, former neighbors, and anyone who had interacted with Devlin over the previous 5 years. They reconstructed his movements on October 6, 2002, confirming he had been off work that Sunday and had access to the white pickup truck he drove at the time, a different vehicle from the one used in 2007. Tire impressions from the 2002 abduction scene, though never conclusively matched due to weathering and time, were consistent with the type of truck Devlin owned then. The most critical piece, however, came from Devlin himself. During prolonged questioning, facing mounting evidence, Devlin eventually admitted to both abductions. He provided details that only the perpetrator could know: the location where he first approached Shawn, the route he took after the abduction, and the specific threats he used to maintain control. While he minimized certain aspects of the crimes, his admissions were detailed enough to corroborate the physical and circumstantial evidence. By February 2007, Devlin faced an extraordinary list of charges across multiple jurisdictions. In Franklin County, 2 counts of kidnapping, Ben Ownby and Shawn Hornbeck, 2 counts of armed criminal action, and multiple counts of forcible sodomy and sexual abuse. In federal court, numerous counts related to child pornography and exploitation. Additional state charges from Washington County for the 2002 abduction of Shawn. Prosecutors from all involved counties and the U.S. Attorney's Office coordinated closely to avoid jurisdictional conflicts. The goal was clear: secure convictions that would ensure Devlin would never be free again. In October 2007, 9 months after the rescue, Michael Devlin pleaded guilty to dozens of state and federal charges. The plea deal spared both families the trauma of a full trial, where graphic testimony would have been required. In exchange, Devlin received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus additional decades for the federal charges. During the sentencing hearing, Pam Akers and Craig Akers addressed the court. Their words were measured but powerful. They spoke not only of the pain their family had endured, but of the strength they had found in each other and in the community that never stopped searching. They thanked the investigators, the witness Mitchell Holtz, and every volunteer who had kept Shawn's name alive. The judge, in imposing sentence, described Devlin's crimes as among the most heinous imaginable and emphasized the lifelong impact on the victims. He noted that the sentences were designed to reflect both punishment and protection of society. With the guilty pleas and sentencing, the criminal justice phase came to a close. Michael Devlin was remanded to prison, where he remained serving his consecutive life terms as of 2026. But for investigators, the case had one final profound lesson: persistence matters. The Hornbeck file had never been closed. Tips had been followed for years. The foundation had kept the public engaged. And when a single observant teenager noticed something wrong at a bus stop, that long-dormant case file was ready to connect the dots. The investigation into Shawn Hornbeck's disappearance, one that spanned more than 4 years of dead ends, ultimately solved itself through the combination of old-fashioned detective work, modern forensics, community vigilance, and the courage of 2 boys who survived: the rescue of Shawn Hornbeck and Ben Ownby on January 12, 2007, did not mark the end of their story, only the beginning of a new chapter. For both boys and for their families, the road to recovery would be long, private, and deeply personal. The world celebrated what many called a miracle, but the real work, healing, rebuilding trust, and finding a way to live with what had happened, took place far from the cameras. In the weeks and months that followed, Shawn and Ben were surrounded by a carefully constructed circle of support. Medical professionals, trauma specialists, and child psychologists worked with them individually and with their families. The focus was never on forcing them to recount every detail, but on helping them process the experience at their own pace. Both boys were given space to decide how much they wanted to share and when. Shawn, now 15, returned home to Richwoods. The community that had prayed, searched, and never forgotten him welcomed him back with overwhelming warmth, but also with respect for his need for privacy. He enrolled in school, caught up on years of missed education, and slowly rediscovered the simple routines of teenage life: friends, sports, music, and family dinners. Pam and Craig Akers have always been careful in public statements to emphasize Shawn's strength and determination. They describe him as resilient, thoughtful, and focused on moving forward. Ben, 13 at the time of his rescue, returned to his family in Beaufort. He, too, faced the challenge of reintegrating into school and social life after an experience that had lasted only days but carried the weight of profound violation. His family, like Shawn's, chose to shield him from excessive media attention, allowing him to heal in a supportive, low-profile environment. Both families made a deliberate decision early on to protect the boy's privacy above all else. They rarely granted interviews, and when they did, the focus remained on gratitude to law enforcement, to the community, to the witness whose quick thinking had made the difference. They asked the public to respect the boy's right to grow up without constant reminders of the past. Over the years, Shawn has spoken publicly on only a few occasions, always with the same message. He is grateful to be alive, to be home, and to have a future. He has pursued education, built relationships, and worked toward independence. Today, as an adult, he leads a private life, but those who know him describe a young man who has turned unimaginable hardship into quiet purpose. The Shawn Hornbeck Foundation, which had sustained hope for more than 4 years, evolved in the wake of the rescue. With Shawn safely home, the focus shifted from searching for one missing child to supporting broader efforts in child safety and missing persons recovery. The foundation continued its child identification programs, safety education in schools, and support for families in crisis. In 2013, after years of dedicated work, Pam and Craig Akers made the decision to close the Shawn Hornbeck Foundation as a standalone entity. They transitioned its resources, mission, and volunteer network into the Missouri Valley Search and Rescue Team, an organization that continues to operate today. This team provides trained volunteer support for missing persons cases across the region, using the same disciplined, community-driven approach that kept Shawn's case alive for so long. The legacy of the case extends far beyond Missouri. Law enforcement agencies across the country studied the investigation as a model of persistence in long-term missing child cases. The importance of witness observation, in this instance, a 17-year-old boy who noticed something wrong and acted immediately, became a textbook example in training programs. The coordination between local, state, and federal agencies, the use of Amber Alerts, and the value of never shelving an open case all reinforced best practices that have helped in subsequent recoveries. For many families still waiting for answers, the story of Shawn Hornbeck offers something precious, tangible hope. It reminds them that even after years of silence, even when leads have gone cold, breakthroughs can happen. It underscores the power of community, of neighbors who search, volunteers who organize, and strangers who keep a name in their prayers. Shawn's survival, and Ben's, also highlights the complex reality of coercive control in abduction cases. Experts in trauma and victimology point to the psychological mechanisms, fear, isolation, threats to loved ones, that can make escape seem impossible, even when opportunities exist. Understanding these dynamics has helped improve training for first responders, educators, and the public, fostering greater empathy rather than judgment toward survivors. As the years have passed, the Missouri miracle has faded from daily headlines, but its lessons endure. Every Amber Alert issued, every child safety program taught, every volunteer who joins a search team carries a small piece of what the Akers family, investigators, and an entire community built together. Today, Shawn Hornbeck is no longer defined by what happened to him between the ages of 11 and 15. He is a survivor who chose to keep going, who rebuilt his life with courage and quiet dignity. His family continues to honor that strength by supporting others who face similar darkness. In the end, this is not a story about the worst of humanity. It is a story about the best, the refusal to give up, the courage to speak up, the power of love and persistence, and the unbreakable human capacity to heal. Thank you for listening to this account of Shawn Hornbeck's story. If you or someone you know needs support, resources are available through organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and local crisis centers. Hope persists, and so does the work to protect it.